But let's talk to an aviation expert, Paul Charles, who's a former Virgin Atlantic and Eurostar Communications Director and joins us now. Good morning to you, Paul.
Good morning, Julia.
Obviously, devastating to hear of another plane crash, Ukrainian Boeing 737 crash. Initially, it does appear to have been technical problems, but as I say, it's important to stress this is a very different aircraft from the 737 MAX, where we've seen these two crashes in the recent years.
It is. It's a very different aircraft, even though it shares the same name, 737. There are some 7,000 of them that have been manufactured, and it first entered service about 3.5 to 4 years ago. So its track record actually is very good, but there are a number of questions here, not least for Boeing, around the safety culture, which has been ongoing since the 737 MAX stories started emerging after the first crash, of course. There will be concerns as to how fast, I think, Ukraine Airlines have actually said this morning that there is engine malfunction. It seems to me very quick to come out with that statement. I'm very surprised. This crash only happened a few hours ago, and it seems very quick to come to that conclusion. So I'm surprised they have made that statement about it being an engine malfunction, I have to say.
Well, indeed, the plane's black box has already been recovered by rescue workers in Iran. But again, there wouldn't have been time to to analyse that. It does appear that the plane took off and then was on fire as it crashed. But the airline has said that the plane passed its last technical check as recently as January the 6th. As you say, very quick to say it's engine failure. I think that obviously a lot of people, the very first thought was that this was related to the escalating tensions between Iran and America.
Well, there will be that speculation, which is going to be difficult to rule out immediately.
Yes, some thoughts that it might have been a missile that had gone astray or something of the like.
That's right. Clearly, there's coincidence here. Clearly, missiles were in the air at a similar time, so you cannot rule it out. And that's why I think I'm very surprised it's so quick for the airline to say they think it is technical engine failure. However, what is surprising, I think, is also the range of nationalities on board. Just how many people are flying from 7 different countries, from Iran to Ukraine, and that would suggest quite a few of those would be probably, I suspect, in the oil industry, but also people leaving, getting out of Iran, as they have been advised to do by their governments, especially the US and the UK government. So that's why there were so many nationalities on board. Normally, you would not find so many nationalities.
Well, no, exactly. 11 Ukrainian citizens, including 9 crew members, so only 2 Ukrainian citizens as passengers, 82 Iranians and 63 Canadians on board, as well as the three Brits and others. So, yeah, that suggests that there may be some concerns there. Now, we know airlines have been now rerouting to avoid the airspace.
Yes, they have. And, of course, that has several implications, not just for passengers, but also for the airlines themselves. So for the airlines, of course, that means they have to take on board extra fuel. They are taking longer journeys as they reroute around Iran. Some are already rerouting around Iraq. And that means longer journeys, especially if you're flying between Europe and Asia. And it can add, in some cases, an hour to an hour and 10 minutes to a flight. So that means more fuel is being put on board by the airline. That's costing them more. For passengers, of course, when we're flying, that means an hour longer on the journey. So that has implications in terms of when we arrive at our airports. So there are lots of implications around flights being rerouted. I think the other thing to bear in mind is that, as you were talking about Boeing, the new CEO starts in a few days. This is the last thing, of course, he would have wanted. It's another damage exercise for Boeing and their tarnished reputation from the 737 MAX, from the CEO resigned just before Christmas, from the fact that Airbus sold more aircraft last year than Boeing did. This is not a good way at all for Boeing to be starting a fresh decade.
Well, indeed. Now, just also breaking news, the Ukrainian president has said he's instructed prosecutors to open criminal proceedings following that plane crash. What do you read into that?
Well, that would be, it's certainly, again, very quick to take that sort of action just a few hours after the crash, because normally you would wait for the investigators to clear the scene, to visit the scene. You would wait for processions and burials to take place of those who have sadly been affected by this. It's very fast to come up with this information. I'm quite surprised, actually. normally in a crisis situation following a crash, it would take certainly longer than 5 or 6 hours to say these things. But that would mean a criminal investigation clearly would be under Ukrainian law. They have to do that. So they will want to look at what the technical teams were doing with the aircraft that was last checked on Monday as much as anything else. This doesn't necessarily mean criminal investigation into whether missiles brought this plane down. I think it's more related to how the checks were carried out on the aircraft over the last 48 hours.
Yeah, indeed. Maybe the more information will emerge very, very quickly. But again, in terms of what's happening with Boeing, obviously you say the CEO resigned, all these big issues over the regulation where effectively, I mean, utterly bizarre. I think many of us found out in America that where most of these aircraft are made, that they were effectively allowed to regulate themselves, big concerns over the safety. This is the predecessor, though, to the 737 MAX, where we've had those two big crashes and massive big investigations and big compensation claims forthcoming, no doubt. But this plane that's crashed is actually got a very good safety record, hasn't it?
Yes, it does. And as I say, it's only been in service since early, I think it was 2016 with most aircraft, actually, with most airlines. American carriers like Southwest are big users of the 737-800. Introduced it into its fleet late 2017. So, it's relatively new, obviously, for an aircraft type. But the difficulty is there is a question mark over the safety culture at Boeing at the moment. And so investigators, and don't forget, you've got American investigators looking into this, as well as Iranian, as well as Ukrainian. So there are a number of authorities involved. But they will want to look at the safety culture in the lead up to this flight. Were the right processes put in place? Assuming there was an engine malfunction of some kind, what were the safety checks on the ground as that aircraft came in to the airport in Tehran, as it left? What was the safety culture over the last 48 hours? Are we going through the logs? What happened at the last major check that the airline says it took on Monday? All of these questions will be asked about the surroundings of that aircraft's journey and its movements around this time.
Okay.
It will take some time to get the results.